You're listening to the Sex and Psychology Podcast, the sex ed you never got in school and won't get anywhere else. I am your host, Dr. Justin Niemiller. I am a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and author of the book, Tell Me What You Want, The Science of Sexual Desire and How It Can Help You Improve Your Sex Life. We tend to think about sex, and especially orgasm, in very mechanical terms. We focus on anatomy, technique, stimulation, and whether our bodies are doing what they're quote-unquote supposed to be doing. But a lot of people struggle privately with feeling disconnected from their bodies, stuck in their heads during sex, or being unable to feel desire or pleasure in the way that they want to, and no amount of technique seems to fix that. Today, we're going to explore why that is, and how things like shame, anxiety, trauma, and nervous system regulation shape our capacity for desire, orgasm, and pleasure. I am joined once again by Julianne Maxwald, a licensed psychoanalyst, couples therapist, and ASEX certified sex therapist based in New York City. She has over 15 years of experience working with individuals and couples. She is the author of the new book, Psychoanalytic Sex Therapy, Exploring the Unconscious Life of Sexuality. This is going to be another fascinating conversation that you won't want to miss. Stick around and we're going to jump in right after the break. If you love the science of sex as much as I do, consider becoming a friend of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. The Kinsey Institute is the world's premier research organization on sex and relationships, and you can help them continue the legacy of Dr. Alfred Kinsey, whose pioneering research changed everything we think we know about sex. Visit kinseyinstitute.org to make an impact. Your donations can help support ongoing research projects on critical topics. You can also show your support by following Kinsey Institute on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting sex science. Okay, Julianne, let's dive deeper into the world of psychoanalytic sex therapy. So in the last episode, we looked at how porn and fantasy operate through that lens and how sexual symptoms can be meaningful signals about what's going on beneath the surface. Today, we're turning toward things that a lot of people struggle with privately, including difficulty feeling desire, difficulty staying present during sex, and difficulty orgasming. And we're going to explore how those struggles are shaped by things like shame, anxiety, trauma, and the way our nervous system learns to protect us. So to start off, can you talk to us a little bit about how you discuss orgasm in your book and why orgasm itself is such fertile ground for psychoanalytic exploration?
Yes. So I have this idea where the unconscious as orgasm. And what I mean by that is that it's a surrendering of types. It's a surrendering of control. It's a surrendering of needing to know and understand things. It's really a surrendering in a way to pleasure. So pleasure not necessarily as something that we have to do or we have to achieve or we have to, take steps to get to, but rather allowing desire to emerge, allowing pleasure to emerge, and surrendering in a way to that experience.
Yeah, that has me thinking about this line from the Rocky Horror Picture Show of giving yourself over to absolute pleasure. I think that's sort of what you're describing in the context of orgasm, like in terms of it being about letting go, about surrendering. Now, I think that's an interesting way to think about orgasms because culturally and even medically, we tend to think about orgasm as this purely physiological event. It's all about the nerves firing, the blood flow, the muscular contractions. And that's why a heck of a lot of treatments for orgasmic difficulties tend to focus on things like pelvic floor exercises or changing your sexual technique or using very specific stimulation patterns. But it's not just that way with orgasm. We tend to look at a lot of sexual issues through this lens as being simple problems of mechanical function in the body. But if we only ever think about sex and orgasm in this very mechanical way, we might be missing out on something really important. But depending on the provider that you see, if you're having a sexual issue, the way sexual problems are often treated is either purely physiological or purely psychological. These two things often aren't really integrated. So I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about what gets overlooked when we approach sexual difficulties in that very split way, and what becomes possible when we start to take this more holistic approach to understanding sex and sexual problems.
Absolutely. And I think this also ties into what's included when we think about a sexual experience. I talk about this in relation to this case, but this is an exercise that Susanna Isenza uses that I've learned from her. And the exercise is to write down, kind of free associate to three different words: sensual, sexual, and erotic. And what I love about that is it really widens the umbrella of what a sexual experience can be. That there are
Hmm.
so many different layers to sex that sure, an orgasm, it's a muscle spasm. It's something that happens physiologically. But what that experience is like for people and what it means, that there's so many different experiences of what that can be, sensations in the body that can be under the umbrella of an orgasm. And looking at it this way, thinking about the nervous system, thinking about pleasure, thinking about relaxation, thinking about letting desire emerge instead of chasing it or fixing it or pursuing it is, in my opinion, just a far more creative way to look at the problem. And it really helps people be a little more present in the experience, which in so many ways lays the foundation for having an orgasm.
Yeah. And I mean, orgasm itself, it's both a physiological and a psychological experience, right? And when we're only focusing on one or the other, we're missing out on a piece of the puzzle there, right? And certainly there's a lot that you can do to try and improve the physical sensation or enhance the physical sensation of orgasm. If you do Kegel exercises or pelvic floor training and things like that. But there are other aspects and elements to orgasm beyond just that physical release component, and that's why some people talk about orgasm and climax as being two separate experiences, with climax being that physiological release and the muscular contraction piece, and orgasm as being more about the mental state that you're in. And that can take a lot of different forms depending on the person. For some people, orgasm is almost a spiritual experience for them. For other people, it's this really intense wave or feeling of pleasure throughout their entire body. Orgasm means different things to different people, and what we appreciate or enjoy about it can vary from situation to situation, from person to person, and so forth. So, I mean, I could talk about orgasms for days because there's a lot that goes into that.
Right. It's so interesting because I'm thinking about a client of mine who I saw recently, and she came in because she could orgasm during masturbation, but she couldn't orgasm during partnered sex. And this
Hmm.
was creating a lot of problems, not so much for her, but particularly for her husband. And so I started to work with her individually. And I would ask her, what the difference is. And she had a very particular pattern that she used for masturbation. So I would ask her then about what partnered sex was like and what she was experiencing. And she said, well, I'm like 90% there. I can get 90% there, but I just can't get all the way there.
Hmm.
And so I started asking her, like, what do you mean by all the way there? Like, what exactly is that? And there was like this very intense orgasm that she would have through masturbation, but she was also using a vibrator and a very high setting. And so I asked her to look at OMG Yes, the website OMG Yes, and just look at how different women orgasm. And so she did that and she came back and she said, Julianne, this is so wild. I think I am orgasming. I just didn't realize it because I was trying to match this
Mm.
experience that I was having in masturbation. But I saw, these examples of women who were orgasming and it looked exactly like what I'm doing. And so some of it was really just her widening her umbrella around what orgasm actually is. It like blew her mind. It literally blew her mind.
Yeah. And, that's something I've always wondered about is whether different people might sort of label different experiences physically and psychologically as orgasm. And so when we're talking about what an orgasm means or what an orgasm feels like, two people might be talking about something that's totally different, right? Because the nature of the orgasmic experience can be highly individually variable and it can vary based on whether we're masturbating or engaged in partnered sex. And sometimes our orgasms are more intense versus less intense. And so, yeah,
Right.
it's
It's fascinating.
absolutely. So let's talk about shame and trauma for a bit. You discuss these in the book as states that the nervous system kind of gets stuck in, where there's this tightening up, this numbing, this dissociation, or this feeling of staying vigilant. So, can you talk a little bit about how things like shame and trauma show up in the body during sex and how that can shape our ability to feel desire and pleasure and to have an orgasm?
Yeah, absolutely. Shame is an interesting experience because, I mean, we can conceptually think about shame and we know what it means, the difference between like guilt and shame, for example. But I really think of shame as something that is felt, it's an experience. And there are so many kind of somatic manifestations of shame. And so part of the way that I look at desire in particular is how able is your nervous system to receive pleasure or desire. And so a
Mhm.
lot of the work that I do with my clients and with my couples, I use a really like a trauma informed lens, whether or not there is like event trauma that one partner might be working through. But so much of what we know from trauma informed care is just really tending to the nervous system and paying attention to what's happening to our bodies, paying attention to what we're feeling inside. And so oftentimes the work that I will do with my individuals or my couples is just to make sure that I'm asking, as we're talking about whatever the issues are, the difficulties are, to really do some kind of somatic work and just ask them, as you're talking about it, where do you feel that in your body? Just to start helping people pay more attention to what is actually happening in their body. Because
Yeah.
if your baseline is anxiety, your ability to experience certain kinds of pleasure is just going to be compromised. And so, what I find is that so many people come in really with these ideas around what they want to change or fix or experience or feel. But part of that process is really learning how to actually feel it in your body. And so, I have really loved bringing in somatic work with my individuals and in my couples. And I found that for many people, it really just opens up and expands their range of healing for sure. Like so much healing that happens when you work somatically, but also just the range of what people can feel and experience by doing somatic work.
Yeah, being in touch with your body is so, so important when it comes to having pleasurable sexual experiences. And related to that is this topic of spectatoring, which is something you also talk about a bit in the book, which is that experience of you being in your head during sex and kind of getting stuck there, where you're monitoring yourself, judging yourself, you're worrying. You're doing all these things instead of actually being in your body and having that connected experience, not just with your partner, but also with yourself. So, why is spectatoring so corrosive to the erotic experience? And why do you think so many people get trapped there without kind of realizing it?
I think it's exactly what you said is that if we're inside of our heads, we can't really be in our body. And the amount of noise that happens in our heads is, for some people, like incredibly loud. And so it's very easy to conceptually sort of say, well, you just need to get into your body or, you just need to like do some deep breathing or focusing. But what I found is that actually walking people through what that feels like and helping them sort of connect with their body, you have to, in some ways, have an embodied experience of what it feels like to actually feel in your body. We can think about emotions, we can experience our emotions. There's a level that we can talk about that, but to actually have an embodied experience, which sounds a little simple, but it really isn't. It can be a very profound experience if you help people, for example, do a grounding exercise or just do some deep breathing or focus on certain sensations on their skin or inside their body. What I find, it gives people a very grounded tool that they can then take home and just practice, which sort of indirectly just allows them to shift from being in their mind to being in their body. Like it's amazing how detached life just is from our bodies.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I struggle with too a lot of times where I'll get so stuck in my head just in everyday life that I'm not even noticing my surroundings or, paying attention to sensation in my body. And sometimes I have to, be very intentional about this to like try and shut off the mental noise and to be present and to be in the moment. And it's really a skill that you kind of have to build up and learn over time. It's hard to just like turn it off and on, but when you start to practice breath work and other things like that, or mindfulness activities that teach you how to be present in your body, it's something that becomes easier over time. Hey guys, have you ever wanted more from your orgasms? Then you're going to want to check out Load Boost from VB Health. VB Health has a simple mission: creating supplements that work. Load Boost is designed to improve the taste, volume, and overall health of your semen. This doctor-formulated supplement can help to enhance your orgasms and pleasure and support your fertility at the same time. VB Health takes quality seriously. Made in the USA and NSF certified, their products are produced in an FDA-registered facility. They even share their third-party lab results publicly because they value trust and transparency. This isn't anything like the junk they're selling in a gas station. Thousands of guys from all across the US and 45 different countries have already tried Load Boost, and over 88% of the reviews are 4 or 5 stars from verified buyers. Elevate your performance with Load Boost. You just might become someone's new favorite performer. Learn more and get yours at loadboost.com. Visit loadboost.com and use code Justin for 10% off, or click the link in the show notes. Every time the winter holidays wind down, the thing I crave most is rest and relaxation. So right about now, I'm always on the hunt for small changes I can make around the house that make a huge difference in how I feel day to day. One of the best upgrades I've already made this year is swapping out my old towels for Cozy Earth's Luxe Bath Towels. These are the kinds of towels that make stepping out of the shower feel genuinely luxurious. They're incredibly soft and plush, but they also dry you off fast, and you don't realize how much that matters until you experience it. Made from a cotton and viscose from bamboo blend, wrapping up in these towels honestly feels like getting a warm hug. And when your mornings and evenings feel calmer and more comfortable, it sets the tone for the rest of the day. It puts you in the right headspace to take on whatever's coming. Cozy Earth does that. Whether it's their towels, sheets, pajamas, or loungewear, it offers comfort that lasts. And it's risk-free. Try it out, and if you don't love it, returns are hassle-free. Plus, there's a 10-year warranty so that you can rest assured that they stand behind their quality. Start the new year off right and give your home the luxury it deserves. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code Justin for up to 20% off. And if you get a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention that you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Refresh your routines with comfort that makes every day feel like a fresh start. Now, one of the cases you discuss in the book is this story of Maya and Jack, who have a desire discrepancy. So Maya has very little desire for sex, and she also has some difficulty orgasming. And Jack has more desire for sex, and he wants to have more, and he's trying very hard to help. He's suggesting a lot of apps and exercises and techniques and things that she might try. And, it's all very well-intentioned. But unfortunately, his attempts to try and help actually have this paradoxical effect of increasing Maya's anxiety, and it leads her to shut down. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how, in relationships, sometimes that well-intentioned help that we want to give our partners actually creates a feeling of pressure. What might be a better way of approaching a situation like this? Like, instead of trying to fix our partner, what might we try to do instead?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's exactly it, is that Jack was so well-intentioned and he was so determined to kind of fix this problem, came to the first session with this whole list of techniques and ways that they could spice up their sex life. And Maya sort of bought into this idea too, like, yes, this is something that we need to fix. I need to figure out what the problem is, or I need to figure out what my desire is. How do I unlock my desire? How do I turn it back on? And what we did instead was we really kind of slowed everything down. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I gave them this assignment that I just described from Susanna Senza to describe their associations to sexuality, sensuality, and to eroticism. I gave them that homework assignment. And when they came back in and it was Maya's turn to start talking about her list, she just started to cry. And she sort of revealed that, like, I couldn't even do this list. It was so depressing because I feel so numb and I feel so dead
Mhm.
inside. She couldn't even access like her imagination of what something, what would be desirable, and felt a tremendous amount of shame, a tremendous amount of guilt because she wanted to feel connected to Jack. She loved him and she wanted to, have that experience. And so what we did is we took even a further step back and we just started to talk about what it felt like for her to be calm, what kinds of things helped her to feel calm. And that was really like shifting from pleasure to just her nervous system. What did her nervous system need in order to feel calm, in order to feel safe? And so we did she described, a whole set of circumstances having to do with the beach and the ocean that really helped her feel calm. Like she loved to take walks on the beach at night in particular. She loved the feeling of the ocean air on her skin. And she was describing in really amazing detail all these sort of sensations, like these physical sensations, the cold sand under her feet, the smell of the sea and the ocean. And so we just stayed with that. Like we really just stayed with how do we get her nervous system to feel calm? And we built a whole set of interventions around these like at home ocean showers. That's what they called them, the ocean showers. So what we came up with together was that Jack would help set up the bathroom as an ocean shower. And so they had music, candles. Twice a week, she was going to take like a 30-minute shower. And it wasn't a functional shower, it was just for relaxation. It was just to kind of create this experience of like calm and to help her reconnect with her body in this calm way instead of feeling like there was something wrong with her. She needed to fix something, that they needed to add more, 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 more into their life. It was about the opposite. Let's go back to like the beginning here and create a sense of safety, a sense of calm. Part of this that we discovered in our work together is that she grew up in a household in an environment where there was a lot of expectations on her. She had very high achieving parents who expected a lot from her. And if she didn't sort of meet their expectations in terms of academics and sports, there was always a kind of disappointment, a withdrawal, a very subtle shaming, or, a lot of lectures around what she could do better, on how she could improve her skill. And they weren't, they were well intentioned parents. They just had high expectations of her. But it sort of registered in her nervous system that I need to perform well in order to be loved, accepted, and so that really carried over in terms of the relational dynamic between her and Jack, and her whole body just shut down. And of course it did, like just shut down under the weight of this burden that she needed to somehow perform. And so the showers were such a great way for her to reconnect or to connect, maybe even for the first time, to just feeling calm, to feeling relaxed, to not feel the pressure of having to get it right. And Jack was, he was such a great guy and he was so truly invested in helping her that he loved the idea of just giving her the space, and he loved sort of creating this experience for her. And that was it. There was no like, okay, we're going to put a timeline on this. This was just it. We're just going to stay with this. And I guess it was maybe about 6 weeks of this. Maya came in and she said, she was a little embarrassed. And she said, I kind of want to tell you something. I'm a little embarrassed about it, but I feel really happy because I feel like I'm making progress. She was still like invested in making progress. And she said that she was starting to feel a little bit of desire and was having these fantasies of Jack being this kind of intruder and coming into the showers and this kind of mysterious, it wasn't like a rape fantasy, but it was, like this intruder coming in who wanted her and desired her. And Jack, of course, thought this was a great idea. And he too was feeling aroused just by the sensuality of these showers that they had created. And so we decided together that they would just experiment with that a little bit. Like this wasn't going to be a sexual experience, but Jack was going to enter into the showers and maybe, play this out a little bit or just take a shower together with her. Again, no pressure whatsoever for sex. And they did this for a while and then eventually that just led to more erotic connection between the two of them and they did end up having sex and her desire sort of emerged. It's not anything, specifically that they did, but they just created the kind of environment where her nervous system was calm. She felt relaxed, there was safety, and it just naturally emerged on its own.
Yeah, I love that story. And, I love how Maya's desire didn't reappear simply because she just tried to be more sexual or she forced herself to have sex because that wasn't going to work, right? It wasn't really getting at what she actually needs in order to feel desire and pleasure. It emerged because it started with this calmness, with this focusing on sensation and with feeling safe. And then fantasy and desire kind of emerged organically from that, right? And so I think for a lot of people, you kind of need to have this progression of, calmness, focus on sensation, feeling safety before desire, pleasure, all these things can even appear, right? And so it has me thinking a lot about how I think this is the kind of approach you might do with a lot of people who have responsive desire, where they really need space for that desire to really spring forth. And you have to cultivate the right erotic conditions for it, because for a lot of people, that desire just doesn't hit you spontaneously and out of the blue. And you have to find other ways to access it. It sounds like you found a way to do that here with this couple.
It's very easy to kind of go to the arousal piece and think
Mhm.
about like, how do we get aroused? How do we stimulate ourselves? But if you've got a nervous system that kind of races and freezes and feels a lot of pressure, that's not going to work. You don't need more stimulation and arousal. You need to calm the nervous system down so that those, like you're saying, the responsive layers can kind of build on themselves.
And I think too, something else we can take away from this story is, in terms of what healing looks like and how we need to have realistic expectations when we go into sex therapy. Because, it's not the case now that Maya always wants sex and has spontaneous desire and she orgasms super easily. She still needs to have that sense of presence and safety and play that's all cultivated in order for desire and arousal and these other things to kind of emerge, right? And so I think we just need to have realistic expectations when we go into sex therapy. It's not going to be like you're going to flip a light switch and now suddenly you're going to have spontaneous desire and you're going to want sex all the time and you and your partner are going to be having sex all the time. It doesn't always look like that.
Right, exactly. There's flexibility in our erotic landscape, but there's also, the erotic landscape is what it is. But interestingly, also, a lot of the pressure that Jack was feeling or the pressure that he was putting on Maya had to do with him having a higher libido, but some of it was also just the feeling of frustration and disconnection and hopelessness and fear, really. And so once they were able to reconnect on an emotional level and feel like sexual partners again, it reduced a lot of the pressure and intensity that he was feeling. And so he could kind of relax a little bit and trust that, yeah, sex is alive between them. It just looks in this particular way.
Yeah. And that also tells us that, in order for sex therapy to work when you've got a couple that you're dealing with, you need to have that buy in from both partners, right? You can't have just one person who's motivated and interested in working on this particular issue. You need both partners to be willing to accommodate one another's needs and to really try and put forth the effort, because fixing a sexual problem isn't just a one-sided thing. Sex problems are not one person's issue. They're a relational issue.
That really speaks to the relational piece of it, because if Jack was a different kind of person, he might have been more demanding or more insistent, and their relational connection was strong, and there was a lot of mutual respect between the two of them. I mean, they were definitely kind of having these moments of conflict because they didn't have anyone to help them kind of talk through it or work through it, but the relational piece is so important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this amazing conversation, Julianne. It was a pleasure to have you here. Can you please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about you and your work and get a copy of your new book?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. This has been great. People can find me at my website, which is www.juliannemaxwald.co. CVO. They can also find me on Instagram at Julianne Maxwald. And my book is available on the Routledge website with a 20% off discount. And it's also available on Amazon.
And your book is called Psychoanalytic Sex Therapy, Exploring the Unconscious Life of Sexuality. I'll be sure to include links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate having you here.
Thanks, Justin. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To keep up with new episodes of this podcast, visit my website, Sex and Psychology, at sexandpsychology.com, or subscribe on your favorite platform, where I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please consider becoming a Sex and Psychology Premium subscriber to enjoy ad-free listening for just $3.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media for daily sex research updates. I'm on Blue Sky and X at Justin Lehmiller and Instagram at Justin J. Lehmiller. Also, be sure to check out my book, Tell Me What You Want. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.